10 steps to make a successful indie game. Step 1. Don't make an indie game. I'll give you a moment with that. If you're still here, that means one of a few things. Either you already knew the odds and you're here for tactical information anyway, or you heard don't make an indie game and assumed that I was being provocative and you want to find out when I'll walk it back. I am not going to walk it back. The median indie game earns less than $4,000 over its entire commercial lifetime. Not per year, total. That number accounts for games that have been on the market for a decade. The distribution is not a bell curve where most games earn somewhere in the middle. It is a power law. A very small number of titles capture almost all of the revenue. The rest of the market fills in below them at numbers that, if you converted them to hourly wages, would make you put the game engine down and go do something else. This is not a secret, the data is public. Steam publishes enough information that researchers have been able to model it for years. The people making games know this in a general sense. They proceed anyway. Which is fine. That is their choice to make. But I'm not going to pretend that the market is something other than what it is in order to make this video more encouraging. The market is brutal. The steps that follow are real. If you go in knowing both of those things, you're in a better position than most people who try this. So, there are 9 more steps. Let's go. Most people think that making an indie game as a creative project that they will eventually market. The sequence is wrong. The game is a product. Products need markets. Markets are not built after a product ships, or at least not efficiently. The most expensive way to acquire an audience is to find strangers after launch and convince them to care about a thing they've never heard from a developer that they have never heard of. The cheapest way is to already have their attention before the game exists. Cultural capital is not the same thing as a following, exactly. It is closer to, let's say, standing, reputation, the accumulated sense among a specific community that you are worth paying attention to. It can come from being a respected voice in a genre forum, from being known as a useful contributor to other people's projects, from shipping smaller things, game jam entries, mods, demos, that demonstrated that you can finish what you start. The game you make will be your most visible product, but it is not your first one. Your presence in the community, your demonstrated taste, your established point of view, those ship before the game does. They are what make people care when the game arrives. Build those things first, and build the game second. There is a difference between a fan and a consumer, and the difference matters more at launch than any other point in a game's commercial life. A customer, a consumer, evaluates your game against alternatives. They look at the price, the reviews, the screenshots, the genre competition, and then they make a decision based around that information. If the game is rough around the edges, they will leave a mixed review. If it doesn't meet expectations, they will refund it. They are rational actors in a market. Their behavior is not a moral failing, it is simply how markets work. A fan evaluates your game against their hope for it. They have context. They know what you were trying to do. They have been paying attention since before the game existed, which means they have some investment in the outcome. Rough edges at launch read differently to a fan, not as a failure but as a starting point. Your review score in the first 2 weeks will be one of the most durable signals your game will ever send. The algorithm uses it. Future customers use it. It is extremely difficult to recover from a poorly review score no matter how much you patch. If your first buyers are strangers, you are depending on strangers to be patient with a project that may not be fully polished. That is a bad bet. If your first buyers are fans, you have given yourself a margin of error. Fan first launch is not softness or collectivism or whatever, it is simply risk management. The most common cause of indie game failure is not bad design, it is not poor marketing, it is not underfunding, though underfunding is real. It is scope. Scope creep is the process by which a project expands continuously during development, each individual addition seeming reasonable in isolation until the total scope is so large that the team cannot ship it. The additions are almost never bad ideas, they are usually good ideas. The problem is that good ideas added to a project that is not yet finished are not improvements, they are delays. There is a useful exercise here. Take your original concept. List every feature you plan to include. Now, find the version of the game that uses roughly 10 to 30% of that list and still has a coherent core loop. That is the game you should ship. Not because ambition is bad, but because a finished small game exists in the market and can earn revenue and build an audience. An unfinished ambitious game does not exist anywhere except on your hard drive, and the market cannot pay you for work that it cannot see. Scope your game before you start, put the limit in writing, then defend it against yourself because you will be your own worst enemy on this. I wrote an entire video about the price ceiling in the indie market. The short version is this. There is an effective ceiling on indie game pricing that exists not because of any formal rule, but because of market expectations that have been established over years of consumer behavior. For most genres, that ceiling sits around $20. Some genres push it to $30. Premium single-player narrative games occasionally escape it. Most games do not. The ceiling alone is not moved by quality or effort alone. This is the part that is hardest to accept. A better game than any competitor at the same price point will not necessarily command a higher price point. The market's reference point is the genre, not the specific product. This means two things practically. First is to price within the range your genre has already established. Pricing above that range requires you to reframe your entire value proposition, which is a marketing problem that you almost certainly do not have the resources to solve. Second, if your production cost assumptions require pricing above the ceiling to be sustainable, your production cost assumptions are wrong. Adjust them before you start, not after you ship. Shipping a game that nobody knows is coming is not a launch, it is a file upload. A launch is a marketing event. It is actually quite similar to an IPO. It has a run-up period during which visibility is built, press coverage is secured, and content creators are briefed, and the community you spent step 2 and 3 cultivating is primed and ready to act on day 1. The Steam algorithm and equivalents on other platforms respond to momentum. A game that sells 100 units on launch days signals something different to the algorithm than the game that sells 100 units across its first month. The former gets surfaced and the latter does not. Momentum requires coordination. Coordination requires lead time. The general guidance is that your marketing campaign should begin at minimum 3 months before launch, and your wishlist campaign should begin before that. The wishlist number is the metric that matters most in the pre-launch period. I'll explain this later, but for now, plan to launch before you plan the ship date, and then you work backward. Genre is not a creative constraint. Or rather it is, but that's not the most important thing it is. Genre is your distribution channel. It is your infrastructure. When you make a game in an established genre, you inherit a pre-built audience with documented preferences, active communities on existing platforms, established influencer pipelines, Northern Lion as an example, subreddits and Discord servers, and YouTube channels whose entire purpose is to find and amplify new entries in exactly that genre, and a set of genre conventions that function as a shared vocabulary between you and your potential player before they have ever seen your game. All of that exists already. You did not build it. You get to use it if you make something that fits. Fighting genre expectations is expensive. Subverting them is expensive. It requires convincing people that your game is worth their attention despite not matching the pattern they came looking for. That is a harder sell at every stage of the discovery process. Working within a genre is not creative surrender. It is choosing to leverage infrastructure that took years, if not decades, to build, rather than trying to build your own from zero. Decide which genre you're in before you decide what's in the game. The audience does not come with the genre, the audience comes with the genre, and the genre does not come with the audience. Make a free-to-play mobile port of your game with ads and microtransactions. Let me say that again clearly. Ads and microtransactions. This will feel wrong. The indie community has very clear stated value against monetization, and free-to-play mobile with microtransactions violates most of them. That tension is real and I am not dismissing it. I'm telling you to do it anyway. Here's why. The mobile free-to-play market is the attention economy operating at full fidelity. It is the most direct possible interface between a product and what the market will actually pay for access to human time. The revenue model is not pretty, it is however functional, and it does not require your premium game to carry the entire financial weight of your operation. The goal is to not make the mobile part your artistic statement. The goal is to make it fun to game you actually care about. There is a long tradition in creative industries of separating the work that pays from the work that matters. Session musicians play commercials to fund albums. Architects design corporate parks to fund the buildings they want in their portfolios. The commerce does not corrupt the art unless you let it. The market doesn't care about how the funding feels, so neither should you. Build the honest product and fund it with the commercial one. Pre-launch analytics produce a lot of numbers. Most of them are not informative. Followers on social platforms are not informative. They measure passive attention from people who may or may not be in a purchasing mindset on platforms that have their own algorithmic mediation between your content and your audience. Discord member counts are not informative. Community size does not predict conversion. Impressions are not informative. Reach without intent is noise. Wish lists are informative if Steam wants to use them correctly. A Steam wishlist represents a person who, in theory, while on a platform specifically designed for purchasing games, saw your game and made an active decision to track it. That is expressed purchase intent in the purchasing environment. It is the closest pre-launch signal to an actual sale that exists. Steam algorithm uses wish counts as a signal. Your day one sales will draw substantially from your wish list. The conversion data you'll use to understand your launch performance is built from wishlist data. Evaluate every pre-launch marketing activity by one question. Does this convert to wish lists? If the answer is consistently no, redirect the efforts. The indie market is a tournament economy. A small number of games capture most of the revenue. If you make one game, you are buying one lottery ticket. The math on a single lottery ticket is bad. The catalog, however, changes the math. Each game you ship cross-promotes the others. Platforms surface your back catalog when a new release generates attention. Your algorithm history compounds across titles. The audience that you built for Game 1 is pre-warmed for Game 2. The cultural capital you accumulated from Step 2 applies across everything you make, not just the first thing. This is how developers who survive in the indie market actually survive. Not by winning once, but by shipping consistently over a long enough period that the capital or your catalog becomes a business rather than a single bet. The goal of your first game is to not be your best game, it is to be finished, to exist, to give you data, experience, and a second audience cohort to sell your second game to. Ship it, and then you make the next one. That is the whole strategy. Everything else in this list is in the service of being able to do that repeatedly, sustainably, without going broke between releases. The market is brutal. It has always been brutal. The people still standing in 10 years will be the ones who figured out how to stay in the game long enough for the compounding to work. Don't make an indie game. Or do, if you know what you're walking into.